Okay. So this is just putting it in context from a timetable perspective. As we, have previously said, this is following the 2007, 2008 modules, the bond deals, the construction company purchases, the Iskender development projects or whatever, all which, will flow into this, which is the first US dollar transactions with PetroSaudi. And we'll go through the timetable for the PetroSaudi in great detail in later slides. But the PetroSaudi scheme actually only really occurred over a 6-week period. And then as you move on in time, you're going to have the Goldman Sachs phases, you're going to have the Deutsche Bank phases, you're going to have side deals that are occurring once again in Malaysian or Singapore currency, including a whole separate scheme with another state-owned entity. You're going to have some concealment of the theft. You're also going to have new thefts, including thefts, with the Chinese government and IPIC, which is the Venezuela or the UAE conspirators, so that he could conceal it. So, and this goes all the way up. He was stealing money as late as 2016. The PetroSaudi phase is only occurring in 2009. And I would remind everybody that when this was occurring in 2009, he was still only 27 years old. So
Yeah.
he was very, very young.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the age factor definitely is very interesting. But I'm sure that he was, as you shared earlier, that, his father, his dad, and his grandfather, as I was reading the book also, I saw that, they had some role in the background always, maybe, groomed him up a bit.
Oh, very much. And as we'll talk about later, actually, his
Sure.
father was the one who introduced him to the bankers at Coutts, which formed Good Star. And, very much was the whole family was involved in the embezzlements. The other thing that we'll talk about in the whole scheme is really the impact of the interest payments. Some people mistakenly refer to 1MDB as a sovereign wealth fund. That implies that, the wealth was already inputted into 1MDB. But instead, what happened was Jolo was actually incurring debt, albeit guaranteed by the Malaysian government, but debt that had very high interest cost. And so, as we'll see later on, the interest cost of his embezzlement actually, in many cases, exceeded the amount that he actually stole. And then you always have the opportunity cost, which is, he was representing to the Malaysian people, the Malaysian government, the Malaysian media, that this was going to have great benefits for the Malaysian people because, they were going to develop their economy, have jobs, help low income. Because of stealing the money and the interest, they got none of those benefits. So the cost of 1MDB is greatly magnified, much more so than most of the media recognizes.
Right. And one interesting thing is interesting for me is that, in the background, right, because this started in 2008, 2009, at least, as far as we know, and there was a financial crisis that time. So, as you study these cases and your views with regards to scams, right? Do you see more scams occurring during financial crisis or economic booms, or it has got no relationship with that?
Actually, that's a really good point that you bring up about the financial crisis. So financial crises actually have two impacts. One is they tend to reveal past scams. So, the Bernie Madoff situation actually came to light because of the financial crisis. Warren Buffett is widely quoted as saying, when financial crises are when the tide goes out, you can see who's not wearing a bathing suit. But the other thing is, it also provides a lot of stress on various financial actors who are still trying to maintain their business models and that sort of thing, and so they may be more likely to cut corners. It also causes quite a bit of disruption, and we'll talk about this in the timeline on Coutts, but Coutts was actually owned by RBS, which stood for Royal Bank of Scotland. In 2008, they were completely taken over by the UK government and became a UK government subsidiary. So from a governance perspective, Coutts itself was going through a lot of changes, and it actually impacted the Singapore office because the Singapore office, as we'll talk about, wanted to get out from under the changing culture at RBS, which was, really moving more towards a more traditional banking model and away from private banking. And Jolo and quite frankly, the bankers in Singapore took advantage of this disruption and, to the benefit of their theft.
That's very interesting because, yeah, these financial crises, and I'm sure that these are designed especially around these special time, economic wise.
Yeah, just to maybe elaborate a little bit. So, virtually everybody that was impacted on this, including the co-conspirators, were trying to deal with the financial crisis. So you had the UAE
Oh,
and
okay.
Abu Dhabi people that were seeing their investments and their opportunities plummeting. You had Jolo, who was planning on very lucrative construction companies coming out of development, both in the Middle East and in Malaysia, that those opportunities were not going to be there because, with the financial crisis, there was a lot less growth and investment. And so what they were doing was they were looking for new investment opportunities. And we'll see in Module 4 with the Goldman Sachs, but Goldman Sachs was very much driven to expand in Asia because of the financial crisis. And a lot of what the people inside Goldman Sachs and Jolo were doing was to take advantage of that desire to expand into Asia.
Yeah, and exactly so, because I think that when there's a financial crisis, definitely the targets are adversely affected. I mean, the revenue targets of these banks and financial institutions. So there's a bit of a desperation there goes. And I think that I can relate because, in the post-pandemic time, it is a challenging time. And I think that this case study is even more interesting now because, it's a different kind of crisis, but there are so many different kind of challenges in many countries still. So yeah, I think that it makes a lot of sense and very relevant at this point also.
Okay, so this I very much agree with all of that. And I guess one last thought on the financial crisis. In addition to all the transaction information, that occurred and the frauds and that sort of thing, banks were very desperate to get deposits and funds, which were drying up. So from even on the liability side, they were looking for customers who were not impacted by the financial crisis the way that perhaps their mainstream customer base was.
Right, exactly. Very good point.